the Cranford Street, Innes Road, Berwick Street improvements, and I'll hand over to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just give a quick overview of the project, if that's okay with you.
Yep.
So the Christchurch Northern Corridor will extend the northern motorway through to QE2 Drive and Cranford Street. The project is one of the roads of national significance, and its cost is around $300 million. One of the main challenges when the Christchurch Northern Corridor was approved through the RMA process was what to do with the traffic when it arrives at the Cranford-Innes intersection. And that was well recognised by the independent experts as well as the hearings panel who considered the application at the time. Essentially, the process that was agreed at that time was to prepare a downstream effects management plan, also known as the DEMP, and this needed to be prepared by an independent expert, in this case Dr. Shane Turner, who's sitting behind me. And essentially what that says is that if there is a determination by the independent expert of increased traffic experience by more than 30% on potentially affected streets, and the independent traffic expert recommends measures to improve the operation of Cranford Street and Sherborne Street and/or traffic calming work, then the council must undertake those improvement measures or calming works as recommended. So it's slightly different to the normal situation where council itself would be in a situation where if we were looking to address the impacts of a particular project, we would be the ones who would be making that decision ourselves. In this instance, we have to take on board or give effect to the recommendations of the independent expert. So just in terms of the DEMP, and this is quite relevant to those councillors who weren't in the previous triennium, we have undertaken 3 rounds of consultation on the downstream effects management plan, and in 2019 council approved various physical works, and they are outlined in the report, the supplementary report which is in front of you. And that's upgrades to intersections, new cycle lanes, road narrowing, pedestrian refuges, and those sorts of things, as well as turning restrictions. So the CNC itself has been delayed. The initial opening date was supposed to be the middle of this year, but now, because of a variety of reasons, it was put out to the end of this year. So it informally opens on Monday the 30th of November. That's only one lane in each direction. And there's an open day on the 12th of December, and it officially opens on the 17th. Now, given that the opening date has been put back, the staff recommendation to mid-December, the staff recommendation is that we essentially monitor the downstream traffic effects post that opening. And part of the reason for that is because that is probably the quietest period that we have across the city in terms of traffic levels. They are typically 30 to 40% lower in that school holiday period, Christmas period, than they normally are. So it gives us a chance to test what is actually going to happen when it opens, albeit with lower traffic levels, rather than relying on monitoring or modelling, which doesn't always reflect human behaviour. So that's in part the reasons behind our recommendation. In terms of, there's a couple of things with the work that we've done with strategic partners across the CNC. There is a high occupancy or 2 high occupancy vehicle lanes on the CNC, southbound ones. Essentially from the intersection of Maid North Road and Tram Road, there's a left-hand lane. That is a 24/7 high occupancy vehicle lane, and that ends midway over the Waimat Bridge to allow for traffic changing lanes and exiting at the Cheney's off-ramp. This is both for heavy vehicles, so trucks, and for carpooling. And then continuing south, just before the Main North Road Bridge, the right-hand lane is a high occupancy vehicle lane from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. That ends about 400 metres north of the Cranford Street roundabout, and trucks cannot use that. We have also done work with our strategic partners on other travel demand management issues associated with the HOV lane, and Waimakariri District Council have agreed to put in park and ride sites at Kaiapoi and Rangiora, and Environment Canterbury are starting rapid bus services as well. So it has been a combination of effort across the organisations in an attempt to try and reduce the number of vehicles or impose travel demand management measures, so we mitigate the impacts downstream of the Cranford intersection. So that's the overview. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Mike, did you want to just raise that issue around the independent expert and their potential for the public transport?
Yeah, thank you. And I'd also like to acknowledge my Community Board Councillor colleague, Pauline Cotter, and the work obviously we've been doing in this space, and also the Community Board members up in the gallery. Because, yeah, and I guess, you know, we're hearing very loudly and clearly from the affected community, I guess, where they want to see council heading with transport in general. And that is towards encouraging modal shift. And when I read through this report and the letter from Dr. Turner, it doesn't rule out actually trialling a bus lane, which I believe should be the preference of this council, because it will, I guess, signal our commitment to our strategic partners, our commitment to the community that is affected, and actually really push where we want to go as a city and a country, and actually trying to encourage people to jump out of their SOV car and into actually public transport as actually a mode of getting from A to B. And so that obviously is not accounted for in your recommendation. So I would like to see that we change that tact and actually move towards resolutions that actually allow us to have peak time bus lanes instead of actually the no clearway. Notwithstanding the fact that actually the opening of the motorway itself will not coincide with heavy traffic, so I have no issue with the timing being a little bit later, and the fact that it will have to be a trial just to actually work out how it is working.
There's no need for complimenting people for presenting. I mean, there's been a lot of work going on, and I know staff have spent time with the independent expert as well, and I'm really grateful that that has occurred. And I've got a much better understanding of the process around the independent expert than I had at the beginning of this process, so which is good. So perhaps if you'd like to, would you like to respond to, you know, how we might address that as a way forward?
In terms of the desire for bus lanes. Yeah, look, from our perspective, I think there's some draft resolutions which are open to the council to consider, and Joe has a copy of those. We have, given the deputations that occurred when the community board report was put up, where there was a variety of requests both from the community for bus lanes, or certainly no clearway, whereas on the other side of the fence some of the strategic partners were keen to have a clearway or an HOV lane. We've worked with the independent expert, and while I think it'd be fair to say his preference is for clearways, he is open to the idea of trialling a bus lane from February next year. And so what, if that time frame is acceptable to the councillors and they want to pursue that option, what that would give us is an opportunity to have the CNC open. It would give us a certain period of time that we can see how the traffic reacts, albeit with lower traffic volumes than normal. And then if we were to start potential bus lanes in February and monitor those, particularly in relation to their efficiency and potential rat running of local streets, we could get a real sense for how the traffic is going to actually work. And that would tie in with the express bus service that ECAN are looking to introduce mid-January-ish. So certainly that's something that we think could go forward.
Would there be any chance of actually getting the two dates to coincide, you know, with the, to get the bus service starting with the public transport lane?
Look, you could do. It's simply there's a couple of benefits from starting a few weeks later, and that one, it gives us a little bit more time to monitor the traffic in mid-January when the volumes do start to build up a little bit, so we get a little bit of a better understanding of what might happen going into February. And two, as the traffic's flowing pretty freely through there in that time anyway, the benefits of waiting for a few weeks won't make too much difference on the journey time or journey time reliability of the bus. So our preference would be to start it in February. That also gives us some time to do some work on what the bus lane might look like, and we would probably need to come back to council, I think, or the community board for resolution on that. So there's a bit of, if the council does want to go down the bus lane route, then we would need to do some work and firm up what that looks like.
Yeah. Would it be quicker in that sense for a delegation to sit with the community board for the bus lane for the? I mean, presumably it's a design issue, is it?
It's just a design issue, yes. So we haven't started that yet without receiving the resolution today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure where the delegation sits because it's a special vehicle lane, so I'd need to. Yeah, it sits with council.
Well, perhaps we could get some advice on that before the conclusion of the meeting, because if we could do that in one sort of one paper now, then it would be helpful. Pauline?
Thank you. Yeah, I was heartened to read in Shane's report, and about halfway down, that he states that I'm aware through previous engagement that the local community board, City Council and councillors and many of their partners are in favour of providing alternative to the car by supporting buses and bikes, so there can be a move away from reliance on private vehicles. And this is consistent with many of the council's transport and other strategies, and supportive of the goal to reduce climate change effects. But he goes on to say he has to balance that with the key requirements of the downstream effects management plan, which is to reduce rat running traffic. And I note that he has mentioned that term rat running a minimum of seven times in this report, and that's not without reason, because is it fair to say that is one of the key issues with this downstream effects? And that's one question. And my other question is, I know you've done a lot of work to mitigate that on the east side of Cranford, and on the west side probably might require some, and do you have plans to put anything in there while this trial period is going on so that we can mitigate that effect?
So to answer your first question, yes, the rat running is probably the key concern, and that came out through the designation process. That was one of the key concerns of residents around the proposal for the Christchurch Northern Corridor. So, yep. And for the second question, we're looking at tactical urbanism type approaches where we could potentially go in and do swift changes to streets to address potential rat running issues. If the monitoring that we are proposing to do shows an increase in people using those streets to get wherever they want to be. So yes, we are monitoring that. And
would you do that post the 3 month trial or before it?
Both.
So you could commence
it's ongoing, and if the and this is one of the discussions we've had with Dr. Turner, is that if the monitoring is showing that the numbers are up there, we're going to have to react, whether it's within the 3 month period or outside of the 3 month period. And so we're the team are already having a lot of discussions with the affected residents on the streets, on the streets that are potentially affected and have been identified, all listed up there. So there's been a number of meetings with them already. There's been discussions so that we can react, and the community board clearly and the previous council decision clearly showed a desire to trial options. So we can trial options when talking to the streets, and the residents themselves can be involved in some of that design discussion is and what the outcomes for their street will be.
Right, that's really good.
And we, just to go back to the question, sorry, councillor, there has been a number of traffic calming measures undertaken on the west side, and that turning restrictions are in place, and we also have a whole load of work to do around St Albans School that is ongoing.
And would that also, any works to be included in traffic and rat running mitigation, would that be a community board delegation? Could it be, or could you?
Most of it will be, because it will be. Most of it will be because it's lines and signs.
Because that would make it even more nimble.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron and then Melanie. Yanni.
Yeah, so mine's just around some of the reasons why people may get on the bus. And I found, so the modelling of how many ECAN predicting to get on that bus route and how accurate that is.
How many buses?
No, how many people will be on those buses that won't be in cars. They must have a figure in mind.
Is that?
I don't have the figure to hand, I'm sorry.
So that they must have a target. That they
They
spend
have
a lot of
overall
money.
targets of increased patronage across the city. They may well have specific ones for that route, but I'm not aware of them. That'd be something we'd have to speak to.
Yeah, they've added a targeted rate of $30 per household in Waimakariri, so they must have a goal of...
Yeah, but I think that this is a matter for debate. I mean, it isn't an issue for our staff
Well,
to
it
answer
informs
on this
my
paper.
decision, because unless there's something that's saying that people will get on the bus, I mean, because in 2016 when they did the new one to the airport from Kaupoi Rangiora, they were predicting 1,000 people would use that service, and have we got evidence
as you
that
know,
worked?
the City Council doesn't involve itself or isn't capable of influencing the decisions of ECAN in relation to the buses. So
Well, that's just
it's-
relationships.
No, it's not a relationship. It's where the decision making sits. And I mean, we have a very good working relationship with ECAN, and we as a council have raised issues with them about frequency and reliability of buses. What we can control is one element of it, and this element it presents a challenge in its own right. So the matter is for debate, and you can debate that you don't think enough people use the bus, and I will use the debate that to argue that Waimakariri have invested, so has ECAN, and I believe we should as well, and we should back our communities in that regard. So, I mean, but that's a matter for debate. It's not a question to put to staff.
Well, I was looking for what the plan is, but that's fine. If there isn't one, there isn't one. That's
There
fine.
is a plan, but it is
But
connected.
a plan must have targets.
It is connected
Westfield
between
don't open a
Waimakariri
shopping
and
mall without
Selwyn.
knowing the numbers that'll come through the door. And you should be the same with the bus route. This is $360 million worth of road. That if we're expecting a percentage of the population using that road to be on public transport, we should have really, really clear numbers and targets.
Debate.
and
We
be
would
meeting
like to
them.
create an expectation. It is a matter of debate,
Okay.
and that is what I'm ruling. So,
Well, if
I
no one
don't-
knows the answers, they don't know the answers. That's fine.
It's not a question of not knowing the answers. That is unfair to staff. Staff are here to answer questions that are relevant to the Christchurch City Council, and its function here today is to look at a particular proposal around the Northern Corridor. Staff have made a recommendation. We've got an alternative recommendation that's come from a councillor. So I think we save the political issues for the debate. Melanie.
I was just wondering when in February that would potentially start.
I think that'll just be a matter of design and approvals, and I don't have a firm date on that, and that's why, rather than saying the beginning of February, mid-February or late February, we've just said February. But that's why we've left it open.
Yeah, I've got Yanni and Mike.
Yeah,
Tim.
two questions. The first is just trying to understand that bigger picture. So the Northern Arteria, or the DEM, is basically a result of the Greater Christchurch Urban Development Strategy. Is that kind of what's the driver behind this?
So there's the Christchurch Roads of National Significance, which is essentially three main projects: the Western Corridor, Christchurch Southern Motorway, and the Christchurch Northern Corridor. And they all together are the Christchurch RONs, or Roads of National Significance.
And were they all supported by the Greater Christchurch Urban Development Partnership?
Look, it was a little bit before my time, but I think prior to the earthquakes, certainly some of the thinking around when the UDS was developed, the Urban Development Strategy was developed, that this provided a coherent case to the Crown, and the need for better transportation was fundamental to that. And then the national government came into power in 2008, 2009, whenever it was, and the RONs were one of the first things that they did, and they recognised that Christchurch was reasonably united. And so I don't know if it was a direct result of the UDS, but it was certainly a culmination of that sort of thing.
So, I mean, I appreciate we're looking at a trial for the public passenger transport. I just was trying to kind of understand. I see that we were supposed to do an investment case for PT in 2018, and there's been a lot of work done. 2017 GHD Future Public Transport in Christchurch Strategic Case. 2018 ACOM.
What's the question? Those
I'm trying to
documents are
understand
proceeding.
in terms of what we're proposing, how it fits into the investment case for public transport.
Yeah, perhaps
So-
you could repeat what you said last week, which is that it is not, this route is not included.
Yeah, so there's what we loosely termed public transport futures, which is the umbrella. There's three business cases that sit underneath that and give effect to that. The first two are the foundations and rest of network, and they look to get as much as we can out of the existing network. The third one is the mass rapid transit, which is a separate process. And effectively what the foundations and rest of network is recommending is the kind of bus lanes or bus priority measures along the core routes. This isn't one of the core routes, so it is not recommending bus lanes down here. However, it is recommending an improvement in infrastructure in the way of bus shelters, improved bus facilities and those sorts of things.
Right, so in terms of WIMAC, their spending, because I was taking on board the point the Mayor made, WIMAC has invested.
That's correct.
This is part of a joint-up approach that's outside of our PT business case.
So as part of the Christchurch Northern Corridor and the desire to mitigate the effects downstream, the partners have been working together for the last few years, and we did a travel demand management business case, and there were a number of recommendations that came out of there. One, that we look at parking in the central city, which we're doing. Two, that ECAN look at rapid bus services, which they have done and approved. Three, that Waimakariri look at parking rides, which they have done and have approved. So that's how we've been working together as partners to mitigate the impacts of the downstream effects. So yes, it is part of a coherent strategy.
Right, okay. And this, the final question was, obviously things have changed, and just in terms of, like, can we get advice on how to change the designation? Because it seems like even if we do the trial, we're still stuck with this fundamental problem. So can we get a resolution to get advice back on what would be required to change the designation?
I think there's a legal section in the report itself, and that outlines some of the issues associated with either uplifting or changing the designation. Brent can speak to that better than I can. If you're asking for our advice on that matter, I wouldn't think it's necessary to put a resolution in on that, and that's something we could possibly come back to you on. Today is more a matter of looking at what the treatment is between Innes and Berwick Street between Innes Road and Berwick Street on the Cranford corridor.
I'd hate for us to get to the end of the trial and then want to make changes and not have a process underway to consider it. So
I think that from a staff perspective, the best thing for us to do is work collaboratively with the independent expert and the strategic partners throughout this process, see what the data tells us, monitor it, and then we'll come back to you. I think The RMA designation issue is a slightly separate issue to today's consideration.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Mike and Tim.
Thank you. I'd also just like to acknowledge, because of the comments you said, and acknowledge the work that actually staff has done listening to a few of us, and talking with Dr. Turner. Although I'd written a set of resolutions that are very similar to these ones, obviously their ones are a little bit more technically advanced than mine. So,
Right.
my question though is around the trial for 3 months, and whether we'd get enough data in that time. And I'm just wondering whether actually a 6-month period would create better outcomes in terms of data collection and making those changes.
That might be a question for the independent expert.
Yeah, maybe a question for...
Is Dr. Turner in the house?
Thank you, Dr. Turner. I think that it would be useful for councillors to hear. You can hear that there is a real desire in the community to support both Waimakariri District and ECAN in terms of the work that they've done, and a desire to really test this in a really positive way, which achieves better outcomes for everyone. So, you know, if you could respond to that, the concept, you know, is the 3 months, is that a sort of a slam dunk sort of number, or could we trial it a wee bit longer?
I suppose in terms of trialling a bus lane or high occupancy vehicle lane, bus lane in this case, it does take a while potentially for the patronage to grow, so I can understand the desire to have a longer period. I suppose I'm coming from the perspective of the amount of rat running that might occur in the local streets, and if that is excessive and we're not able to manage that through traffic management, the need to look at going back to the original option, which is the all vehicle clearways. So I think the council have done a lot of modelling that indicates that that the rat running on local streets won't be as bad as potentially we identified early on. So I'd just like to compliment all the work as well that the council have done, especially in the modelling. And that gives me a certain amount of confidence that we can trial these things. We're opening it at a low flow period so we can see what the behaviour actually is, because models are only models. They're not always telling us what's happening in reality. But I suppose my preference for the 3 months, though, is my concerns that we are going to get some poor behaviour and we're not going to be able to manage that through traffic management. Because the problem with the traffic calming features is that if you can get to a level where you really are limiting people's access to their properties if you put in very severe traffic calming. So we can trial stuff, but you can only go so far in trying to stop people doing it. And that's why I kind of had the balanced approach of doing traffic calming and doing some upgrades to the arterial roads to try and get a situation where people aren't having to deal with that rat running in their local streets. So really the 3 months, I think, is quite a period of time to assess that rat running behaviour, and if that's able to be managed through traffic calming, then I'm open obviously to seeing the bus lanes extended longer than 3 months.
Right. So it could, noting that could result in extension of the period of time. That's implied in this, that a successful trial will enable it to continue.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sarah? Oh no, sorry, Mike. My apologies.
No, I'm over
Sorry.
here and I've spoken.
Hey?
I've spoken. That's Tim.
Yeah, it was Tim. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I meant Tim. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm so quiet. And, with the modelling, my question's probably been answered to a degree. With the modelling that's been done, the work that has been done, has your opinion changed that much from your original, when you wrote the document, to today?
Yes, the key thing with the modelling is the capacity constraint caused by the northern approach to the Innes Cranford intersection, and the fact that only not as much traffic can get through that intersection as we initially modelled. We assumed in the strategic modelling we were doing before with the CAST model that more traffic would get through that intersection. So what Nilesh and his team and others in the council have done is they've done a lot more detailed modelling with simulation models looking at how the intersections interact, which I didn't have when I initially wrote the DEMP report. It was something I recommended that they do, and the council have also done that south of Berwick as well, looking at some of the options there. And so, yeah, my opinion has changed because of that modelling. But as I was saying before, that these are only models, so we've got some idea of how people might behave, but people tend to surprise us by behaving in different ways when they drive.
Thank you very much.
Sarah.
Thank you. And I really get the need to do as much as we can to stop the rat running, because that really does impact on those people on those side streets. I was looking at the timing of a potential trial for the bus lane, and noting that, you know, the flows won't be very different and there won't be a lot of congestion, so those first few weeks of the express bus may not make a difference traffic timing wise. But if there's one thing that I've learned over the last few years looking at the transport stuff, is that public transport is often about perception and not just the reality of the times. And do you think that there's a benefit in having everything looking good and like it could be to boost the perception of people getting on the bus, and saying, hey, look, this is a really, really good option, rather than waiting a few weeks? So, you know, is that kind of hitting it all off with a big bang rather than staging it? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yep.
It makes sense. It seems to a core perception thing with people catching the bus. I'm wondering your thoughts on that one. Because if we really want to get as many people on a bus as possible, then starting it and looking like we're starting it really well is really important.
Is that for Shane or for me, Councillor?
Do you want to have a crack at it first?
Oh, look, I agree. I think perception is important. Our view is, just for the reasons I expressed to the chair a wee while ago, that a February start date would be preferable in the round. It gives us a little bit more time to do the design work, get the necessary approvals, as well as, you know, the fact that the bus south of Cranford Innes is not really going to be impacted by any form of congestion in that couple of week period where it might run, but the bus lanes aren't in place. So, I mean, you could go either way, but our preference would be February, and that's possibly borne out a little bit more by just the time and the need to design something up and get it endorsed as well.
Okay, I wouldn't want to delay the bus, but I mean, would there be a benefit in doing both at the same time, or not? I mean, if you delayed the express bus 2 weeks, is that going to make just that perception thing?
Personal view, I don't think that'll be a huge difference. Our preference would still be if the buses come along on 13th or whenever it is of January, you know, to look at a February opening date of bus lanes if that's what the council resolves that they want to put those in.
I've got Anne and Pauline.
Thank you. I'm interested in terms of safety and you talked about, you know, not being able to predict people's behaviour. I'm just wondering what discussions or what communications or what relationship or how we're working with police and traffic management, and is that a consideration at all with the opening of this and the change, you know, the expected changes? Has there been any kind of work with the police on anticipatory stuff?
Not so much work with the police, but there's certainly a huge amount of work which has been going on in terms of the opening of the Christchurch Northern Corridor, and that's been well thought through. And, you know, I just indicated the soft opening of next Monday, and then an open day a couple of weeks after that, and then the formal time when it opens. So there's a huge amount of safety work that goes into a project of that scale, and it is subject to regular audits. So design, and 3 or 4 audits, and they do a post-construction safety audit which has recently been done, and there's some issues that we need to attend to in relation to that, and we'll probably put in temporary measures to make sure that everything's going to be okay by opening date, or leave some of the roads coned off to ensure that the traffic is slower if we're uncertain that we've got the right design in place. So significant amount of work. The police certainly are aware of it, but it's more of an issue for us and Waka Kotahi and the other design partners of that alliance agreement that have been working through it.
Yeah, from my perspective, the ability for the council to act quickly if we do get a route with a lot of rat running, because obviously that creates a safety issue for the community, is really paramount, so that we don't have to wait months before we can actually implement something. And you know, the other key plank in terms of the DEMP was to drop the speed limits on those roads as well, so that if there is that rat running, hopefully if any crashes did occur, they would be of a lower severity. So yeah, that is my concern when you've got lots of rat running traffic down these local streets where people live, that you may get crashes occurring.
Pauline?
Yeah, look, I was just going back to the bus lane. It's my understanding that we have to have the markings done on this section of Cranford prior to the opening of the Northern Corridor, is that correct?
So in terms of the markings, you can mark it out as a just for parking, and so that enables it to be used as it currently is, and then you can pretty quickly put the bus priority measures in, because it's only lines and signs that we're talking about.
Okay.
Any other questions? No. Mike, did you want to move a resolution, specifically this one, and you're happy to leave it at February? It's commencing February. Yeah. Okay. And seconded by Pauline. So, is there any debate? Sorry?
To the alternate motion.
Yes, it's the alternative motion. Oh, sorry, and I've got another one at the bottom. Sorry, where is it? Sorry, I've got another recommendation to add to it, and if the mover and seconder are happy with it, and it's really just to technically do the work that needs to be done under clause 18 of the Christchurch City Council Traffic and Parking Bylaw 2017, and that way we delegate to the board to make the decisions around the necessary design matters. So it's just really to speed things up and not have to require another report back to council. Are you generally?
Oh, I'm happy, and I'm sure the community board are all here pretty much are happy. Yeah.
They seem to be nodding.
Leanne, has anyone foreshadowed the staff recommendation?
No.
Could I foreshadow the staff recommendation?
Yes, you can.
Or signal that I will in the event that this fails?
Yep. All right. So I'll open it up for debate. Pauline.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to speak for long because this has been gone over for Africa, but I'm very supportive of this recommendation, obviously, and thank Councillor Davidson for all the work he's done on this as well. And just referring to Councillor Kewen's discussion about the bus there and the numbers, you know, our role as a council in peak public transport is to provide the infrastructure to support Environment Canterbury's buses so they can enhance the customer experience, which is a part of which is reliability, comfort, and the buzz we get on the bus as it whizzes past the cars. And by doing that, we hope to encourage more people to use the buses. So we've got to start doing this. We've got to start encouraging people onto the buses. I'd also like to thank Dr. Turner for providing this flexibility for council today so that we can make a decision to trial this peak hour bus lane without breaching the RMA in order to meet our obligations to ECAN, as I've just referred to, and to encourage mode shift. So I'm really, really hoping that our North Canterbury residents choose to give this bus service a go. It's comfortable, relaxing, reliable, has Wi-Fi, And don't forget that if you need a car when you're in town, we've got the Zilch car share scheme, which is very popular, very reasonably priced and very green because they're all electric. I want to thank everyone, and particularly the community, for all the involvement and the educated submissions, the really clear submissions that we've received from them, the balanced views that we've had, and the desire to have mode shift, to protect our environment, to protect this community as much as we can from a car invasion, if you like, and to improve the amenity. And I'd like to thank the staff also for it's been like wading through jello, I think, on this. It's been so long, and you've been extremely accommodating, and particularly bringing through stage 2 works with the amenity and the safety, pedestrian crossings, and street features and things like that. So this has been an incredible long journey. I'm really hoping that the outcome with the bus will be a good one for us all, but let's give it a go. And I do encourage councillors to please support this, because this supports our strategic direction as a council. Thank you.
Melanie.
Our council, needs to show the ability to work with our other fellow councils towards a number of future outcomes, and this is one of those opportunities where we can support ECAN in the Waimakariri District Council following their submissions to us. So if we really believe that there's a climate change emergency, I think as a council we obviously should be supporting buses and PT, especially to help reduce the traffic that's coming into the city from the north, and this is a step in that right direction. So there was a sign up at the last meeting, so I urge my fellow councillors to not give the proverbial finger to our future that was on that sign and support bus lanes.
Anyone else? Andrew?
Thank you. This resolution, and thanks to Mike and Pauline for moving and seconding it, is a clear opportunity to show our commitment to mode shift, and in particular our commitment to public transport. If we really want to use more people using public transport because it really is reliable and efficient, then we need to take a leadership position in doing that, and this actually is an opportunity to do so. It's an opportunity to show our commitment to reducing transport-related carbon emissions, which is totally consistent with our carbon neutral targets and with our declaration of a climate and ecological emergency. It's also an opportunity to respect and support our strategic partnerships with ECAN and with Waimakariri. Waimak have invested in PT, and ECAN have made the decision to put this express bus on from the north. This is our opportunity to support those decisions and to show our commitment to those strategic partnerships. And it's worth noting that both ECAN and Waimak were both represented in this chamber at the last time we discussed this with senior people from both organisations. This is also an opportunity to support our community, and I note resolutions 3 and 4 in that regard. It's only a 3-month trial, but we also know how temporary often becomes permanent. There are no guarantees here, but the trial is definitely a move in the right direction. The alternative is to choose not to do this, and in doing so, overtly favour cars and congestion over public transport, not to favour carbon emissions reduction and transport efficiency. We can support this and we can move forward as a well-functioning modern city should, or we can oppose it and we can stand still and refuse to accept that the future of transport and the need for public transport and getting people onto it will be quite different than has been in the past. So the peak hour bus lane overtly supports public transport and mode shift, getting people out of cars and onto fast-moving, efficient public transport. A clear way doesn't do that. So for me, this is really simple. I'm committed to PT, I'm committed to the environment and to reducing our carbon emissions, I'm committed to our strategic relationships with the Regional Council and with Waimakariri, and I'm committed to our community. So for that reason, I'll be supporting this bus lane trial today.
Anne?
And I'm also committed to honouring the relationship that we have with our neighbouring council and ECAN, who have invested a huge amount of money to get express lanes and park and ride established to use this particular part of our network, which must be based on evidence that people want to use PT, are using PT, and otherwise the investment wouldn't be made. I think that Rolleston, what's happening out there with the Selwyn Council, they've got 2 express bus services coming in and out of the city. It's working, people are using it. So the evidence is there, otherwise the money wouldn't be put into it. So let's honour that and let's move forward and let's get this going.
Aaron?
Yeah, I find this to be an interesting experiment, and I'm a little miffed at the lack of evidence on how good PT could be. I haven't seen anything revolutionary that will get people on buses. Certainly since the earthquakes, bus numbers have dropped from 4% usage down to 2.2%, and I know that our areas outside of Christchurch are around 1% usage. I would have liked to have seen other measures, like that motorway should have opened just to buses for the first week, so everyone that wants to try the new shiny new can get on a bus. The buses should have been free for the first week or a month or something, like some radical stuff. We don't see radical stuff, and we also don't see radical changes in the number of people getting on buses. Surprise, surprise. Councillor Johansson and myself for several years now have asked for the factual information of numbers of people getting on buses because we put in bus lanes to show us the true gains on those routes where people have got on the buses because we've put in the bus lanes. I've never heard people saying when the bus whizzes by me, it makes me want to get out of my car and get on the bus. They just say, why are we in a lane for 92% of the population while 2.2 are in the other lane? The other ones, of course, are biking and walking, and they're the ones that are actually saving the planet. Whereas the other 2 lanes that are choked up aren't working. So I would have liked to have seen more stuff that delivered, because Mr. Turner is right. If there's a lot of cars coming down there, they will rat run. I can guarantee you that. They used to do it through St Albans, and they will do it again, because when you come down a road and the road's not moving, human nature is, how do I get there? Well, could get on the bus, but factually speaking, in Christchurch and in Waimakariri and Selwyn, people don't get on the bus. We don't go out and actually ask them why they're not getting on the bus or what would encourage them to get on the bus more. But if this lane goes through and it's an express and there's park and ride, let's see what the numbers are. But even phenomenal growth would be 100%. So great, we now get 2% of people coming across that bridge on a bus. So let's see what happens. But I'm not seeing the radical movements that needed to be done to get people on the bus. If you think these are radical, we'll see where the numbers land in the new year when the reports come back.
Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for what Councillor Keown is saying. I mean, for so many years post the earthquake, we just keep waiting for this investment case and all these things that we could do. And in the meantime, while we're waiting, we're building bloody motorways going through neighbourhoods, destroying communities. We actually need to get a really sensible plan in place for the future of PT. I agree to doing a trial on this. I think this is actually a really sensible thing. But as has been said, previously when we've put things in and asked for evidence base around the level of expenditure to see what's making a difference, we've struggled to get answers. Papanui Road is a classic example of where we spent millions of dollars putting in bus priority lane, and then just a few weeks later after we made that decision, we put a pedestrian crossing in to slow the traffic down and create greater delays to PT vehicles going through. And, you know, we just need to be wise when we spend the money to make sure that we can get the best value of encouraging people to use the buses rather than just cancelling the advantages out. So I strongly endorse the approach of trialling these things to make sure that we can measure and monitor and see what makes a difference. I still think it's disappointing that we don't have any coherent PT strategy for our city and our region when we've got motorways opening up and we're putting in bus lanes and other parts that aren't the designated one in terms of the wider investment case. But I'll definitely support this today. I think fundamentally what this shows is that the motorway should have just come into QE2 Drive and it should have been stopped there and let the traffic disperse naturally. I think we've over-engineered a whole bunch of improvements through further down that is going to create huge problems.
Sarah, anyone else? James?
Yeah, quickly, given that I've foreshadowed the motion, it's probably evident. What's that? I'm not going to withdraw it, Pauline, I'm sorry. But I will make this relatively short. I just don't feel that the bus going past is going to result in people simply taking the bus. I strongly suspect that the actual outcome will be an influx of rat running through the local roads, eroding the quality of life for the residents. So the reason why I foreshadowed the motion is that I like the staff recommendations. I think that they make a lot of sense, and I think what it ultimately proposes is that the solution and most intelligent design solutions will come out of evidence, not jumping to a solution beforehand, of which I'm highly sceptical of the assumptions behind that. So I'm foreshadowing the motion in favour of the officer recommendations.
Sarah?
Thank you. And let's just be clear here, this decision today is not about a great plan for PT for the city. This is about one small thing that we're trying to do to mitigate the impacts of a new motorway on our residents, and I think it's really important that we go ahead and do that. We do need a step change in public transport in Christchurch, absolutely, but that's not what this decision is about today. And if you look about the types of changes that have been made in other places, more, and people have mentioned the Waimakariri Bridge, more people now go over the Auckland Harbour Bridge on a bus in the mornings than do in cars. And that's been a phenomenal change in Auckland. And we can do things like that when we invest and when we make public transport a really attractive thing to do. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, I'll get to close it, but I'll say a couple of words just beforehand. I guess that there's always a degree of frustration, and councillors have expressed it on both sides of the debate, about having to make a decision when the downstream effects of this northern corridor were well known a long time ago. But the decision to have a northern corridor and expand the ability for cars to flood into the central city through this route has been on our books for a very long time, and I'm still struggling to find the actual decision when council confirmed that it would be this methodology in 2007, as Yanni quite rightly pointed out. It was the UDS, which stated at page 170, for northern access, northern arterial linkages, 4-laning of Cranford Street and Hills Road, construction of Hills Road extension and Martian Road intersection improvements. Now, I've asked Aaron if he can recall why we went with this approach, because it was some time ago. I presume it was after the Roads of National Significance policy came in, and he can't recall exactly, but does recall a very disgruntled set of residents next to the one of the residents' retirement villages up that way. Right. So, but that was some time ago, and so that was gone, and I can't really find anything until we get to the decision that we made, which was to enable NZTA to do the works and then charge us for them in retrospect. But we were already committed to the project, so the project was committed a long time ago. It is a natural occurrence. There are many things where you can say build them and they will come, and that's just absolutely not true. If it's a road or a bridge, it is true. Build them and they will come. New York City found that to their disadvantage, and I think we're finding it here. So I'll hand over to you, Mike.
Thank you. Look, firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the community and their strong voice on this subject. They're over-consulted, they're fatigued, but they keep coming back and showing their resolve from one battle to the next. And it's not easy. No one likes this motorway that's coming. This is, I think, going to be a good outcome, but it's still not going to actually, solve the bigger problem, which is the actual amount of cars that will be very shortly heading their way. I'd also like to acknowledge the community board who continue to advocate for the community. We know a lot of the cars are coming from Waimakariri, but I would like to acknowledge the Waimakariri District Council who have committed to try and to make transport more sustainable and invest in PT by their park and ride, and also endorsing the express bus route which Environment Canterbury will be putting on. It is something new for this city, this express bus route that will go from park and ride using HOV lanes. Could it be bolder? Probably, and we've asked DCAN to consider doing a 3 trial, and hopefully they listen. It is an opportunity for really trying to shift people out of cars, and I think this vote today shows that we're committed to PT and trying to make PT work. It hasn't been successful for a lot of reasons, and we do have the business case due to come very, very shortly, which hopefully will start to change how we've invested in PT, but that's also going to require bold decision making, because unfortunately it's not cheap. But what I'm seeing from both our council and our strategic partners in Greater Christchurch is actually we're committed to making PT work, because actually we know that the benefits that PT will bring to the city now and well into the future. It's interesting. I believe we've moved a long way, both as a city and a country, in terms of transport since this motorway was agreed to. And instead of just trying to move cars from A to B, we're now trying to focus on moving people in the most sustainable way. And the key to that is actually modal shift. The designation talks about 30% increases, and that's a trigger point for having to do things. So it's how we actually stop that. Because I do have a fear that if we have to end up going to have these clearways, it'll become like Curlich Road, which is not peak time clearways, although they're meant to be. It's 4 lanes, 24/7, and it's not a nice environment to be in. And it's not fair on this community who's having to suffer the consequence of previous government decisions that are going to force a whole lot of traffic into their neighbourhood. We need to continue to be bold and work on transport options that actually encourage people to jump out of their car and use a different form of transport. We all know that there will be a number of people that will still use their cars. We're not trying to stop that. We're trying to encourage other forms. We have very good cycling infrastructure now, and with the increase of people using e-bikes, that's a real option from getting from Rangiora and Kaiapoi into the town. And now we're trying to prioritise buses, an area that we have underinvested in for decades. This is a really good signal, and I hope and encourage everyone to support it.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
So would you like to just pop up your hands? Sam McDonald, Catherine Chu, James Goff and Aaron Keown. Thank you. That is carried, and that is the last item on the agenda for today's meeting. So if I could invite Councillor James Daniels to close the meeting.
Talking is finished. Ka whakahoki atu te whare, mana comes back to the children. So, home ye, hui ye.
Tai ki e. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.